releasing have been a lot more solid and without the problem. And today we are gonna take a look at the Gen Kit with the SKRR-S Tank. It's a slightly different version from the previous SKRR tank and paired with the Gen box mod as a kit. It should be innovative with a few interesting new features under the hood, so we are going to check its ins and outs. I'm going to provide you all the results from my test, give you my final thoughts and perhaps a chance to score, so stick around. Upon opening the box we find the SKRR-S Mesh Tank with the bubble tank and the coil pre-assembled inside. The tank will be black in all colors except the silver. Then we get the Gen box mod. This is the blue color Gen, but it has this really nice gradient to black at the bottom. Same story with the red color one. I think that's absolutely stunning, to be honest, this gradient. Underneath we get two spare sealing O-rings and a straight glass tank. Underneath we also find a spare coil head, this one a 0.15 ohm coil head, as well as a micro USB charging cable. Vaporesso, it's time to move into USB Type-C connection, please. Finally, there is a little envelope with the warranty card inside and the Gen Kit user manual. Last but not least, an additional pamphlet explaining and showing how to verify the authenticity of your product. So, the SKRR-S Tank first. The SKRR-S is just a little different in comparison to the previous version. Now it has smaller airflow intakes and a top fill port with threads instead of the sliding one we've seen on the previous one. This is just a slightly different SKRR tank with two fundamental major flaws. The first, very big flaw we have with this one is how the top fill port has a very high tendency to stay attached to the tank so hard, becoming impossible to unscrew and refill the tank. This has happened to me a number of times. I had to empty the tank and use pliers to grab the chimney and unscrew the top fill port. And the second big flaw is how the coil head stays attached to the chimney almost all the freaking time I try to unscrew the base from the tank. In my opinion, the main reason why the top fill port gets stuck so often is because the threads are super crunchy, and I think you can hear how crunchy they really are. This is how the tank looks like with the bubble tank, and this is how the tank looks like with the straight glass tank. A lot of times, when you screw the coil very tightly to the base to prevent it from getting stuck to the chimney, the next time you need to switch the coil head, good luck. You may have to use some pliers to separate the coil from the base. Honestly, this tank is just overall really bad in the thread tolerances and tolerances in general. I think the other reason why the tank allows us to over-tighten it is because of the gap between the chimney and the coil head. Even though the sealing O-ring is thick enough to seal everything on contact with the coil, that gap still allows you to keep going and keep cranking it down more. You don't get a sense of how well it's screwed down. Visually, you don't know if the tank is already closed and properly sealed. This tank is still compatible with NRG coil heads and smoke baby style coil heads as well. With the smoke coil heads, more often than not, they will actually stay stuck to the chimney. This tank, as far as tolerances and threads, is just overall rubbish. The coils included are very similar. None of these mention the material the coils are made with, which is another con. The 0.2 ohm coil head though uses real mesh, fine mesh, and the same type of post in the center as we've seen in previous coils of theirs. Same thing with the 0.15 ohm coil, where the mesh inside is more of a plexus film, if you will, with more spaced holes and covering a little less surface area. The post assembled inside is almost the same, placed there to help reduce wasted airflow and pushing all the available air through against the coil. Removing the post, we see just a small difference in comparison to their previous coils with the same kind of idea. Now the airflow comes from those holes on the bottom of the post. Anyway, this tank is rubbish and I'm really aggravated. My fingers hurt, so let's move on to the better part of this kit, the Gen box mod. The Gen box mod is a dual battery box mod. It's rather tall but skinny and super light because it's actually entirely made out of plastic. Super lightweight indeed, but still very solid at the same time. It's a rather solid structure all around. The sides of the mod have this perforated and rather interesting dimpled pattern all around. A very nice, very grippy, very squishy, rubberized feel all around as well. The rubberized coating feels very, very nice. The 510 connector has this interesting rose gold color, though I really don't know why. In combination with the firing button, all the different color Gen mods have this rose gold fire button and 510 connector. The 510 connector does protrude from the frame just a hair, enough to prevent scratches on the mod, but not enough to create a visible gap, so that's a good thing. On one of the sides we have Vaporesso imprinted, on the other side we have a little Vaporesso logo, then in between we have absolutely nothing. On the bottom of the mod, not only Gen and a couple of ventilation holes for the batteries, but also this little cutout to help you open the battery door to insert or switch batteries. This battery door, by the way, is super secure and has absolutely no play whatsoever. Taking a peek inside the mod, we can start seeing that with this mod the situation is a lot different. Here we start to see their care and attention to detail, starting with the 510 connector being properly mounted and supported due to the plastic housing. It definitely has the right support on the inside. We can also see rather beefy positive and negative wires, and also a third one for individual battery cell monitoring and hopefully balanced charging as well. As always, I will test that out and let you know. Looking at the PCB up close, we also see how well they've done things. We see the selection, menu and fire switches are protected with silicone gaskets around them, but gaskets that also protrude just enough to prevent any button rattle. Around the screen, we also have a rather thick silicone insulation. Then, on both sides, it's just an overall super clean job. The components are laid out really well, the soldering is clean and nice. They even use two different inductors, one to help rectifying the power to the control part of the board and especially the chipset, and the bigger one for the output to the atomizer. I'm really impressed with this mod and its internals. The battery orientation inside the battery tray could be painted white to contrast with the black and be easier to see. Come on, Vaporesso. By the way, to use this device you are going to need two 18650 batteries, which by the way are not included. You will have to buy them separately. And as always, you can check on djlsbvapes.com which batteries and how to choose them. Over there you find all the relevant information you need. The controls and interface then are super easy, rather outdated but easy to control. With a fire button, a control screen, the up menu and down buttons, as well as a micro USB port for charging and firmware upgrades. The buttons are all rounded, the fire button larger, clicky, but a quiet click with not a whole lot of mushiness or travel. The up menu and down buttons, on the other hand, are a little more clicky and with almost the same travel. Operating this device is simple. 5 clicks of the fire button will turn the device off, 5 clicks again and will turn the device back on. 3 clicks instead will lock the adjustability and still allow you to fire and vape if you have an atomizer attached. Holding both the fire and the menu/selection button will show you the chipset, serial number and firmware installed. I already updated mine, by the way. To access the menu, you can either hold the menu/selection button for 3 seconds or press it 3 times in a quick succession. Inside the menu, we find a different approach this time. I would divide it into 3 main sections or modes. First, we have the 3 main smart modes. Then, we have all the normal modes we are used to having, however, inside the DIY section. And then, we have the system settings. Again, 3 main smart settings, the regular modes and the system settings. 3 main sections. That's how I would subdivide this menu. Selecting any of the 3 smart settings, either pulse, echo or smart temperature control, apart from the mode selected, every time you attach a new coil head and you select new coil, it will pulse a microcurrent, scan and recognize the type of coil you attach, and even switch to pulse wattage mode when the coil is not temperature control compatible, like the Canthal coil I just screwed. What? Welcome to the future, folks. Even if I'm attaching a temperature control coil and I have selected pulse or echo wattage modes and it finds out I just attached the coil that is temperature control capable or temperature control ready, it asks me if what I want is smart temperature control mode instead. What? What kind of voodoo is going on here? Just kidding. Jokes aside, this is really nice. To be perfectly honest, the differences between pulse and echo aren't that noticeable. When we look at the signal, they both do the exact same, so I think the echo is just a gimmick. But a gimmick the device will ask you if you want, both when the battery reaches 20% and when they get down to 10%. Here you can see the different signals you get in pulse, echo, and here what you get with regular variable wattage mode. I really don't see why the need for the pulse mode. I don't understand why we have it here, where most of the devices fire flat and stable these days. Now we need pulse again? It's not necessarily PWM either like in the past, but it's a wavy signal and I don't understand why. Using it in either echo mode or pulse mode, on the screen we have a battery bar and the percentage left on both cells. We have the attached resistance. We also have the time of the puff, including the time of the last one. We have the wattage, and we have the mode. In any of the wattage modes, normal, variable wattage, pulse, and echo, you can adjust from 5 watts in 0.1 watts increments, in 1 watts increments if you hold the button, in 1 watts increments only above 100 watts, and all the way up to 220 watts. It does not round robin, by the way. In smart temperature control, we have pretty much the same items on the screen, but now we have temperature instead. And even though if you hold either the up or the down buttons, you will eventually reach a stopper, if you press it again, you have the ability to switch between degrees Fahrenheit and degrees Celsius. There's really no way to adjust the wattage. It's supposed to be smart, and the only thing else you can do is lock or unlock the resistance by holding both the up and the menu buttons. Even though I've been testing it with the resistance locked and unlocked, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. Even if I let it sit for a few hours, or if I go from a warm place to a cold place. I even use the freezer to test that, by the way. And locking and unlocking the resistance doesn't make any difference. If you want to access all the previous and normal features, you have to access them inside of the DIY menu, and that's something I don't agree with. Inside this menu, you will find normal modes like variable wattage, as well as normal, soft, or hard. You will also find variable temperature control mode for the different materials, including again the place to lock and unlock the resistance attached. We also have the modes like variable voltage. We have the CCW in case you want to build your own power curve. We also have bypass mode as well. Finally, that super player mode we've seen in previous Vaporesso devices, and I think is absolutely nonsense. Once we get to the charge section, we will discuss that a little more, as I will show you the differences in the signal. In bypass mode, the screen won't tell you much, and I would like to see the voltage being delivered and possibly the calculated wattage as well. Vaporesso, we have a screen, let's use it. In normal, not in the smart temperature control mode, by the way, no matter the material you pick, you can actually fine-tune the TCR. I will tell you later which one I found to be more close to accurate. Here we can change the wattage as well, and to save and select, you just have to hold the menu/selection button, and there you go. In any of these normal DIY modes, the device has that automatic smart coil recognition feature. Here, for instances, it just stayed in temperature control even though I attached the Kanthal coil. Last but not least, inside of the system settings menu, we find the place with the puff and the time counters that you can reset. We also have the option to adjust the brightness of the screen. We have the smart variable wattage function that will also suggest a wattage when you attach a new coil. We've seen this before. This is a feature I hate, and I'm glad we have the option to disable it. In this menu, we also have the option to flip the screen if you want. We have the automatic echo setting as well. If you want to be bugged with the mod asking if you want to engage echo mode at 20% and 10%, I'm gonna leave that off as echo doesn't really do a whole lot. The two last settings in this menu are the option to reset the device's defaults, also the place to check the chipset serial number and firmware version installed. Then we have options to go back on both sub and main menus, which is great. One thing I always criticize and really appreciate that they've done here is the fact that the up and down buttons from a wattage and temperature adjustability standpoint on the main working screen are in fact up and down buttons. Inside the menus, they behave aligned and naturally combined with the screen orientation. So in this case, the up is now left and acting as down, and the down as a right button now acting as up, and I really appreciate that. If you opt to charge your batteries inside the mod, by connecting a micro USB cable, the screen will actually tell you the percentage of each cell and the estimated time. I absolutely love that. You can still use it and vape while it's charging though.